Emma never expected anything different that evening. It was just another small-town gathering in Vermont. One of those cozy engagement parties where the scent of cinnamon cider filled the air and laughter floated like snowflakes through the rooms. The fireplace crackled in the corner of Natalie's living room, casting a warm glow that softened everyone's edges. Outside, snow was falling in slow, peaceful silence. Inside, people were sipping wine and sharing memories. Emma had almost skipped it. She wasn't in the mood for smiling through questions about her love life, but something told her to go. She hadn't seen Luke in a while, and some part of her missed the ease of his company. She arrived wrapped in her favorite winter coat, wearing a dark green dress underneath, elegant, simple, a little risky for someone who claimed she wasn't dressing for anyone. But when Luke turned and saw her walk in, she felt it, the pause. His gaze didn't just land on her. It lingered. Not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but in a way that made her heart flutter. His eyes widened, just slightly, a quiet shift, like he was seeing something he hadn't before, or maybe had always seen, but had never let himself show. Luke had always been part of her life, in that steady, reliable way. They'd met at work, in Boston years ago, then reconnected after she moved back to Vermont. He was the guy who remembered her favorite coffee order, who texted her when a new book by her favorite author came out, who showed up to help carry furniture when no one else did. Emma had always felt something for him, a pull, but she told herself it was just friendship. That slow-burning kind that never quite crosses the line. But tonight, under the soft light and in the hush of winter, he looked at her like he wanted to cross it. Throughout the evening, he stayed near, not in an obvious, possessive way, he was too respectful for that. But his presence was constant, like the hum of a familiar song you didn't realize you missed. When she laughed at someone's story, he looked at her like her laugh was the whole point. When they brushed past each other in the kitchen, his hand lingered at the small of her back just a second too long, and she noticed. God, did she notice? Every moment with him that night felt charged, not loud, not dramatic, just real. There was no big scene, no confession under the stars. Just glances, pauses, and the quiet tension of two people who had run out of reasons to keep pretending they didn't feel something more. She caught herself watching him too, how the sleeves of his sweater rolled up just enough to show the veins in his forearms. How he laughed with his whole face, how he looked at her like she wasn't just someone he liked, but someone he saw. And the craziest part, he didn't say anything. Not directly, but it was all there in the way he stood close, in the way his voice softened when he said her name, in the way his eyes held hers, just a heartbeat longer than they used to. Emma felt something shifting, quietly but unmistakably. That night, something unspoken hung between them, something warm, something bold, something fragile. She didn't know what it meant yet, but as she stood by the window, sipping her wine and watching the snow fall, she felt his eyes on her again, and this time, she didn't look away. She knew something had changed, and part of her didn't want to change it back. The warmth of the party had faded into soft background music, and most of the guests had either left or fallen into sleepy conversations around the living room. Emma found herself alone in the kitchen, her wine glass half full, and her thoughts even more so. The window above the sink was fogged with warmth from inside, while beyond it, the Vermont night had grown quieter, darker, and more intimate. That's when Luke walked in. There was something about the way he stepped into the room, calm, deliberate, like he wasn't just walking toward her, but toward something he'd been avoiding for a long time. Emma turned slightly, offering a small smile, but her heart was racing. She could feel it. The shift between them hadn't disappeared. If anything, it was stronger in the silence. The kitchen light made his eyes look darker, deeper, and the way he leaned against the counter, close but not too close, made her nerves tighten in the best and worst way. Luke picked up a bottle of wine, poured himself a little, then looked at her with a quiet kind of focus. "So," he said, his voice lower, softer than usual, "you didn't tell me you were seeing someone." Emma blinked, caught off guard. "I'm not," she answered simply. The silence that followed felt heavier than it should have. Like he was waiting for her to say more. "Why'd you ask?" she added, trying to keep her voice casual. He gave her a slight shrug, then met her eyes again, no smile this time. Just that steady gaze that made her feel like she was standing on the edge of something. "I guess I just thought, someone like you shouldn't be alone for long." His words lingered in the air between them, warm and a little dangerous. Emma's breath caught, but she covered it with a nervous sip of wine. "Maybe I just haven't found the right reason to fall," she said, her tone light, even playful but inside. She felt the weight of what she wasn't saying. The years of holding back. The memories she never shared. The almost love she never let herself feel too deeply. Luke didn't look away. What if you already have, Emma? His voice was gentle, but the question hit her like thunder. She didn't have an answer. At least, not one she was brave enough to say. Her stomach twisted, not in fear, but in recognition. Of truth. Of timing. Of the fact that this man, this friend, had somehow become more than just someone she trusted. He had become someone she wanted, but was too scared to lose. And just as she opened her mouth to say something, anything, his phone rang. The moment cracked. He looked at the screen and sighed. "I should take this," he said quietly, stepping back. She nodded, heart sinking just a little, as if the moment they had shared was slipping away. But even as he walked out of the room, she knew something had changed. She stood there in the stillness, her fingers curled tightly around her wineglass, replaying his words in her mind. "What if you already have?" The question echoed inside her like a slow, rising storm. It wasn't just the wine. It wasn't just the night. It was real. It had always been real. She had just been too afraid to see it. Now she couldn't unsee it. Couldn't unfeel it. The way he looked at her, the way he spoke to her, the way her body leaned just slightly closer when he was near. It all added up to something she wasn't sure she could ignore anymore. And somewhere in her chest, beneath all the walls she'd built, something whispered, "He's worth the fall." And for the first time in years, she let herself wonder what it would feel like to stop holding back. The days after the party moved slowly, like winter lights slipping across a frosted window. Emma went back to her usual routine: work, errands, quiet evenings at home with tea and books, but something inside her had shifted. Every time her phone lit up with a message, her heart raced a little. Most of the time, it was from Luke. Short messages, sweet ones, casual enough to pretend things hadn't changed. "Hey, did you try that new cafe yet?" Or "You'd love this playlist." But under each message was something unspoken, something they were both dancing around. Neither of them mentioned that moment in the kitchen. Neither brought up the way he had looked at her, or the way her breath had caught when he asked if she had already fallen. And still, she thought about it every night before bed. She thought about the way his voice had dropped, how serious and soft he'd sounded, how his words had wrapped around her like a promise. But fear was a strange thing. It didn't scream, it whispered, pulling her back to every heartbreak she had ever known. Warning her not to fall too fast, not to lose something that had been safe for so long. That Friday evening, just as the sun began to set behind the snow-covered rooftops, there was a knock on her apartment door. Emma wasn't expecting anyone. She opened it slowly, and there he was. Luke. No text, no call, just him. Standing there in his winter coat, eyes steady, voice quiet. "I needed to see you," he said. There was something different in his face. Not desperation, not nerves, just clarity. He walked in without waiting for her to say yes, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Emma could feel her heart thudding in her chest like it was trying to tell her something before her brain could catch up. Luke looked around her small, warm living room like he needed to ground himself. Then he turned to face her, standing still. The air between them crackling with things left unsaid. "I don't want to pretend anymore," he said. His voice was low, firm, but there was vulnerability behind it. "I've been holding this in for a long time, and maybe I should have said something sooner, but I couldn't keep doing this halfway thing with you, seeing you, texting you, laughing with you, and pretending like I don't feel more." Emma didn't breathe. Couldn't he stepped closer? "That night, I didn't just look at you differently. I finally let myself admit that I've been looking at you like that for years." She wanted to say something, but all her thoughts tangled in her throat. He didn't reach for her, he didn't need to. His presence was enough to shake the air around her. "I know you're scared," he said softly, "but so am I. I've been scared of losing what we already have, but more scared of never finding out what we could be." Emma's eyes filled, not with sadness, but with something deeper, the weight of years of silence finally meeting a truth too big to ignore. She took a small step forward, and even that tiny movement felt like a leap. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered, her voice unsteady. "I don't know how to let someone in without ruining it." Luke gave her the smallest smile, not smug, not eager, just understanding. "You don't have to know, you just have to try." The room was silent, heavy with emotion. There were no more excuses. No more maybe some days. Just two people standing in the truth of what they'd always been afraid to say. And in that silence, something beautiful bloomed, fragile, but real. They hadn't kissed yet, but they both knew it was coming. And this time, neither of them would pull away. The sun had set completely now, casting Emma's apartment in a soft, golden glow from the few lamps she kept on in the evenings. Outside, the snow-covered streets of Vermont looked peaceful, untouched, like time had slowed just for them. Inside, everything felt still, not quiet in a cold way, but in that warm, breathless kind of stillness that only happens when emotions are too big for words. Emma stood just a few feet from Luke, but the space between them felt charged, like even the air knew something important was happening. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, not from fear anymore, but from something far more powerful, hope. They sat on the couch, knees almost touching, the tension between them delicate but undeniable. There was no rush, no grand declarations. Just two people finally stepping into a truth they'd danced around for too long. The room smelled faintly of vanilla and old books, and the quiet hum of the heater was the only sound. It felt more intimate than any music could have made it. Emma looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not just the man she'd always leaned on, but someone who had quietly waited for her to be ready. He hadn't pushed, hadn't pressured, he'd simply stayed patient, present, and real. She thought about all the times they'd shared coffee without saying much. The nights they'd laughed on the phone until one of them fell asleep. The little things he remembered that most people always forgot. It was never about flashy moments with Luke. It was about feeling safe, even when she was falling apart. And now, looking at him this close, that safety didn't feel like a cage, it felt like freedom. She reached out slowly and took his hand. Their fingers intertwined, so icily it felt like they'd been made for this. For each other. "Why didn't you ever say anything before?" she asked softly. Luke looked down at their hands, then back up at her. "Because I didn't want to be another person who hurt you. I wanted to be the one who waited until you were ready to be seen, really seen." Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming feeling of being known. She hadn't let anyone this close in years. She hadn't trusted anyone to hold her heart gently. But somehow, without forcing it, Luke had gotten there. And that's when it happened. Not rushed, not dramatic. Just quiet and sure. He leaned in, pausing just before his lips met hers, giving her the space to pull back if she needed to. But she didn't. She couldn't. She met him halfway. The kiss was soft, warm, and full of all the things they'd never said out loud. It was the kind of kiss that didn't try to prove anything. It simply felt like coming home, like letting go, like finally choosing what had always been waiting. When they pulled apart, Emma kept her forehead resting gently against his. The moment was too sacred to break with words, but eventually, she whispered, "I didn't see that coming." Luke smiled, brushing his thumb along her cheek. "I've been seeing it for a long time." She laughed softly, wiping away a tear, and leaned back just enough to look at him fully. For once, she wasn't overthinking. She wasn't planning the next step. She was just in it, in the moment, in the feeling, in the newness of something old finally becoming real. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, something beautiful had begun, and neither of them would ever look at each other the same way again,